Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. And overall, thanks to Coptic Solidarity that she invited me to be here as a moderator and a speaker for this interesting panels. Before that I start to talk about anything, I was just looking at this interesting topic for revivaling of Coptic identity. I have kind of 2 minutes interesting talk this morning with Dr. Fatin Maurice and Dr. Ashraf Sadiq. I believe that we have a very interesting panel concerning the revival. Let me, starting with a little bit of introducing our distinguished speakers here. Dr. Fatin, she's a professor in Polk University in Florida, and I believe that she is very interesting person because she's interested in the Coptic revival, language, and she's interested in the program of the visiting the Holy Family. And I am not going to say anything about that because she will say a lot of interesting things about it. Dr. Ashraf Sadiq, I have the pleasure to talk with him a couple of minutes, and I realized that he specialized in something that I was hoping that I could do when I finished my study in Italy. Because after I got my master's degree in architecture, I went to a course for specialization of restoration old monument, hoping that I could do something for my homeland. But for other reason, I didn't go back to Egypt. I stuck in Italy. It was very interesting kind of work. Came to United States. Everybody knows that United States wouldn't have anything more than 200 years old, and there is not the culture of ancient Egyptians. Ancient culture is not in United States. It's very interesting that when I introduced myself to him, he shocked me because I told my father and mother was born in a small town next to Asyut called Abotiga, and he immediately said, no, it is about it. And I was shocked, what does that mean about it from Abotig? And I will leave him to explain this because I realize that he has really great information about Coptic language. I don't go with saying about how many PhD he has and all the wonderful things that he did in the past in his life. I leave this to him to explain it to you. Let me tell you what I would like to talk about the revival of the Copts, but I would like to see it from the political point of view, not from the language point of view or historical point of view, because I believe right now we are living in crucial time in Egypt with the people that they're living in Egypt. One thing came to my mind in order to, I don't want to be that negative talking about this story, but I remember reading something in my research, and I realized that years ago, before the coup of 1952, there was 2 Coptic prime ministers in Egypt. And I believe the revolution, the uprising of 1919 was very interesting because in that moment, Egyptian people, they use like Egyptians. They used to live like Egyptians. They don't live like Muslim, Christian, Copts, whatever. And I don't think that there was discrimination. My personal point of view that the coup of 1952 started all this issue that our brother and sister in Egypt are suffering, and the reason that we are left as a country and we living in the diaspora between Europe and the United States of America. I make a few points concerning to explain to you that the revival, the political revival for Copts would be kind of impossible for a couple of reasons that I believe here. First of all, the Coptic Pope is putting himself in position that he representing the Coptic community religiously and politically. And this is, from my point of view, is not correct, because when he's chosen to be a pope, he's chosen to be a pope for our religious, not for to speak up for us. But also this go back to about 1,000 years or a little bit more. When Muslim occupied Egypt, they realized that that they were Egyptian at this time, they were not Copts. Copts came the next time. And they start to uprising against the Islamic invasion. And in order to control the Christian community, the Muslim leader or Muslim caliphate, whatever you would like to call it, took the Pope at the time, and he pushed him or force him to be the speak person for the Coptic community, for the Christian community. And I think this became like a habit that the Copts start to rely in the Coptic as representative for them. So if the Pope step back from the political arena, this will be good for, first of all, for the church, and will be good for the community, because people can stand up and talk for themselves. And I don't think the Pope is willing to do that. But if he's willing to do this, the second step will be, if we can find in the community, in Coptic community in Egypt, anyone could stand up and speak up for the Christian of Egypt. And the problem raised here, because we have the Muslim against us, and they will not allow these things to happen. The current situation, the political situation that all the Egyptian had interesting or good feeling, including myself, when Al-Sisi took place and removed the Muslim Brotherhood from the government. I was hoping that we really, whatever he said at the time was clear and was honest in his saying. But sadly, after all these years, I believe that the Egyptian political leader, or military political leader, that they are leading the country, it is the same thing since 1952, and it is in this situation that we have Al-Sisi, I believe, that we have the worst situation, because we not only have the military, but we have the Islamic military in the leading of the country. I would like to say a few things about Pope Tawadros and his involving in the political, and how he creating kind of damaging for the Coptic situation. And before that I say anything, I am just to try to quote him from a newspaper dated around April 17, 2019, when he said that each one has the right to express himself. So since that he said that I have the right to express myself, I would like to say that back in September 26, 14, the newspaper Al-Mogiz reporting various statements from Pope Tawadros, and they said that his position, it is contradicting between the spiritual position that he has and his dealing in political issues. And this gives me the strength to say that what I said before, that the Pope position is interesting if he has the right to say whatever he say, but sadly, whatever he is saying is contradicting the reality of Copts in Egypt. Because I could, here there is a few things that I printed out because I don't want to rely on my memory. First of all, he, in April 17, 2019, just a couple of months ago, he said that everything is going in Egypt is fantastic. And finally, we have the first woman governor, and we have other two Christian, the first Christian woman governor. And we have two Christian governors as well. And we have 39 Christian in the parliament, member of the parliament. I mean, I feel that it's my right, if I am capable to be a governor's country aside of my religion, I have the right to be there if the people want me there. It is not a privilege. It's the same thing concerning the two ministers or two governors, whatever, that he said, well, this was always from time of Nasser that we have governor Christians that was chosen. And these people, sadly, they are not really the real Copts that they are fighting for the community. They are people that sitting there because they please the power, the political power, the Islamic political power. The 39, and I conclude here, the 39 members of the parliament, the only time that I heard one of them talking, I mean, they talk, a few of them talking about what's happening to Coptic Christians, but I heard a very loud voice a few years ago, or maybe a year ago, of one lady, I think her name Mervet something, I don't remember the exact name, that she was condemning the president of Tunisia because he is trying to, how you call it, to make the women have the same right in heritage. And while Islam says that the woman has to be 50% of the man. And when I read this statement, I was thinking about two things. First of all, this is not your business to decide what is happening in a religious situation. If overall, you are not a Muslim person. Secondly, this is interference in interior affair of a foreign country. It's not your business. And this is the people that are representing Copts in Egypt, and they are interesting only to please Muslims and just to stay in power. Thank you very much. I hope that I wasn't out of the lines in my thinking and my statement. Thank you very much. Now, please join me to welcome Dr. Fatin Maurice Gerges.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. And I want to actually discuss something different or explain something different for us today. My specialization is in narratives, in stories, and how stories affect the lives of people. When I did my research on not the elevated narratives that use literary words that are beyond the comprehension of the average person. But I worked with folk tales, meaning the most simple denomination of literature, with the purpose of seeing how it affects the lives of people, ordinary people. And interestingly, I believe that if you start from that level, which is the bottom level, you are able to change everything upwards. And let me explain to you this in literary terms. We call this the master narrative. Every group of people, every country, and every age has what we call a commanding master narrative, one narrative that we all subscribe to. All right? This narrative is the one that is usually promoted through the media, through the thoughts of everyone, and through meetings and everything. So, for example, if we're going to talk about the master narrative that we have between us today, and that we've been listening to since yesterday, the master narrative says the Copts are persecuted, things are very bad, and we need to do something about it. That's the master narrative. These are the premises that we start with. Now, there are different master narratives in different places, and we want to talk about the master narrative that is in Egypt. And I believe that the only way to effect change, to make change possible, is to change this master narrative in Egypt. Growing up in Egypt, the master narrative was simple. Muslims are superior to Christians. Christianity is bad, Islam is good, and because Islam is good and is superior and is righteous, Muslims should correct Christians. This was what I grew up in. As a result, small things in the streets that would happen, like my mother would try and take a cab to go to a church, but because a church is not a good thing for a Muslim, he would refuse to give her service. Things like that. My father is from Upper Egypt. He is a dark man. And despite that, and he was an engineer, and he owned a big company. And despite all of this, he was always, his name is Maurice, and they would refer to him as Khawaga, foreigner. Okay? So you would have these small things because this is the master narrative that is going in Egypt. The master narrative says that these people are foreigners, the Copts are foreigners, the Copts are inferior, they believe in 3 gods, they are pagans, and so on. And this narrative during when I was growing up, we were not able to disrupt this narrative in any way. So you would go into a cab, and in the cab, the driver would put on the radio, and the radio would have Quranic verses, or he would put in a tape, and the Quran would continue to say how women who are not veiled are immoral, and are whatever that you want to call them. And this would continue on. And you wouldn't be able to tell him, please put this off, this is offensive, it's rude to do so. And I can go on and describe these small things for hours and hours, right? And this is what we call today in our language, in our academic language, microaggressions, right? You're subjected to these microaggressions every moment. And this is the kind of life that you live in. And that is very true. But I believe that the only way to change this is by changing this master narrative. And we call this the counter narrative. Like, now you can take this narrative and change it. Say, no, Christians are good. Islam has violence. This is not true. We are not foreigners. We are the owners of the land. We are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. All right. Sometimes the political situation does not enable you to do this because you are silenced. And this is the problem. You're not allowed to speak for yourself. You're not allowed to say your story, although your story is the right version. Growing up, I grew up watching television where Sha'rawi was then alive. He would hold the Bible in his hand, and I was very young. And he would hold the Bible like this, and he would say, this book has been changed. And nobody would say, no, it hasn't been changed. Nobody would say anything, because there was this silence that is there. However, luckily for all of us, all of this has changed. And it has changed with the internet, the media, the satellites. Father Abuna Zakaria started what nobody else has done. And again, I'm speaking from my field. My field is narrative, it's the stories. And what did Abuna Zakaria do? Abuna Zakaria said, look, no, this is wrong. Christianity is good. These are the problems in Islam. You don't glorify violence. You don't glorify multiple marriages. You don't glorify abusing children. And he pointed out to all of the wrong things that we were never, ever able to speak about. This is what we call disrupting the master narrative, right? So he's changing the narrative. Today, it's a different environment in Egypt, whether you like it or not. And Islam is suffering erosion because there are so many people who are saying these things. This is wrong, the premise is wrong, and there is a new counter-narrative. So when we speak about, is there a revival I think we are living in an age of revival if we understand it and learn how to use it. If we understand that you need to hammer on the right things, because political will, meaning can Sisi order the Minya governor to be removed? I guess he can. Would that be wise? Would that be realistic? Would that change that minister, that governor, to someone else who is better? The answer is no, because the grassroots, the people on the streets in Minya, do not believe in the essential goodness of the Copts. They do not believe that they are good people and that their faith is a valid faith. They do not respect, they haven't heard this message. And I believe we have to understand that we are in a different age, and that we have tools that we did not have before, and that we need to capitalize on these tools. So the messages, these messages need to reach these areas that have not been reached yet. We're talking about a place in Upper Egypt, and it is a place that is, everybody, I believe, is at an economic disadvantage. There are issues there. We need to address these issues. We need to reach with the message, with the counter narrative, tell our own story, enforce it. And I believe that Sisi, despite the many criticisms that we have heard yesterday and today, I have to say that it is a different age. He is enabling the counter narrative. And for me, and for my field, and for my understanding of how the world works, I think he is doing the best thing that can happen by enabling the counter-narrative. What does it mean to enable it? He allows it. There are people like Khalid Muntasir, who goes into the news and he says, this is wrong. This is nonsense, right? If today we manage to remove all the ahadith from the Quran, because everybody is saying it is wrong, it is invalid, it is nonsense, right? Sahih al-Bukhari, if it's Sahih al-Bukhari, is totally removed, all right? What is left? What is left? You are left with the possibility of reinterpreting. I mean, you have two possibilities. I mean, things like these, when they happen, they become disruptive events in history. And when these disruptive events in history happen, you look at it and people have two reactions to it. They either lose faith. So you'll get lots of people who lose faith in Islam. They are not necessarily going to adopt another religion, but they will simply lose faith. They will no longer be believers, like what we see with the Persians today. All right? We have a huge population of people from Iran who just refuse to subscribe to religion because of the damage that religion has done to their country. And you have the others who see that this is wrong, and they choose to either reinterpret their own religion and say, this is not what it meant, we could not have believed in this, it must have meant something else. And we see examples of these. We've had someone who came to Coptic Solidarity, I think his name is Dr. Zohdi, and he is a person who reinterprets Islam in such a way that he doesn't see in it this violence. And I've seen also people who do this. Or you have them, they just go to convert to other religions that are more peaceful. But to make a long story short, this is how you change history. And we have the opportunity of changing history today simply because we have this free exchange of ideas, which we need to capitalize on. Now, the will of the people and the will of the political will changes based upon this change of faith and belief and ideas. Meaning, if I believe that Dr. Ashraf is good, I will sit with him and I will talk with him, right? But if I believe, and I will help him, and I will do things to work for him, but if I believe that he is not good, and that I am better, and that he is not worthy, I will not sit with him, and I will not talk with him, and I will not help him. Therefore, the change of the ideas will lead to the change above. You have to change the ideas first before you can ask people to act upon them. You can't act on what you don't believe in. No matter how hard, no matter how hard I enforce upon you laws. And you can see this very clearly in the attempt to apply good Egyptian law. So we have good Egyptian law, which talks about you're not supposed to speak bad about other religions, which was actually written to protect the Christians from evil things said against them. But because people don't believe in it, they apply it to the opposite. So it was never ever applied on Muslims, but it was always applied on Christians. Why? Because the underlying belief, the belief of the common man, is a wrong belief. So I keep saying it is not about changing the top, but it's about changing the bottom. And we are successful now in changing the bottom. So let us continue to do this. The other thing that I would like to speak about today is when we talk about, I want a revival. Survival or revival, right? We're talking about the two ends of the range. Yesterday we were talking about, is Christianity going to survive in Egypt? Will there be Copts in Egypt? And now we're talking about the opposite. I want a revival. And I guess the two questions are valid because in every location and in every place, like when you speak about Minya or you speak about Sina, survival seems to be the right word. Are these people going to survive in these areas? And we have to address that in terms of survival. But if you go to the north and you want to speak about a revival, yes, you can speak about a revival. But again, when we speak about revival, we have to understand what is revival. What do we want? What do we want as Copts? What does revival mean for us? If I ask each one of you, what do you want to see? What do you want to revive? Now, if you're saying, I want to revive the Coptic language, the answer is, scientifically speaking, the Coptic language will not be revived. Don't try. And why is it not going to be revived and don't try? And I'm going to explain it to you academically, all right? Because this is my area, this is my field. We've stopped talking, not writing, in the 8th century. This was the end of, we don't have any composition after the 8th century. Like, you know, all of you live here, so you understand how language progresses. So the first thing that you lose is the ability to write. The most difficult thing is composition, is to write a piece of writing. And this is the first thing that you lose. And then you lose talking, then you lose comprehension. In the 8th century, we don't have any composition, so we've lost that. So from the 8th century up till the 21st century, language has not developed. And language is not dead, language is alive. What does it mean that language is alive? It adapts to our new needs. Tell me how many diseases were discovered from the 8th century up till the 21st? There is no equivalent for diabetes in the Coptic language. There is no equivalent for the description of the knowledge that we have acquired from the 8th language up till the 21st. I'm not going to speak about the computer and the technology. All right? So what are you talking about? You can't revive a language that has been dead for 13 centuries, that did not cope with times. Language is living. It adapts to our needs. It's a means to communicate. So if we are keeping the Coptic language as a nod to our ancestors, keep it. But if you think that you are going to speak with it, and I mean use it as a language, no, that's not going to happen. All right? Scientifically, it is not possible. That's one thing. So let's set aside the language. What is left of our Coptic revival? You talk about our liturgies and our hymns and our music. We've kept that very well. It is alive everywhere. We have it in our churches here. It's not that we haven't been successful. We have been successful. And on the contrary, there is a revival. Why? Because it has been translated. It is used. I mean, I've heard it in Mexico, in the Spanish language. Abuna Zakaria has translated all the liturgies, everything and all the alhan into Spanish, and he uses it. We have wonderful people. I go to a church that is completely English in California, and they do an amazing job with the alhan and with the liturgy and all of that. we have it translated to almost every language. We have gone to Africa. We've done wonderful things. We've gone to Japan now. So we're expanding. We're doing wonderful things. So if there's a revival there, yes, there is. All right. What is left? The culture. What is the culture that we're looking for that we want to keep? Is it the faith? Our faith is alive and is doing well. Now, I have 2 daughters, and I have 2 grandsons. My older daughter was born in the Middle East. She wasn't born in Egypt, but she was born in the Middle East. My younger one is born here, and she's 20 now. The question is, when I say revival is not for us only. It's for our children, right? So we as Copts, what do we expect of our children? What do you expect them to revive? What do you want from them? What do you want them to do? You need to focus on that. When you speak about revival, you don't speak about what I can do. You speak about what do I want my children to do? The question is faith. Many of them are very faithful. They've started churches with their own understanding of what they want. So we have Coptic churches that doesn't have Coptic language, right? And we have Coptic churches that are based on Orthodox belief. They are all Coptic churches. Very well, we're doing great. Now, if they are going to live their life and adapt to their times, this is exactly what they should do. If they're going to learn the English language, they must. They have to be a part of the society. We have to adapt and we have to accept change. So when we speak about revival has to be rephrased and reframed. We have to understand when we talk about revival that what our children are doing today in the United States is revival. And support it and help it. Now, I guess my message today, to just sum it up, is that we need to rethink our plans. One of the things that I've heard yesterday, all of the sessions, and for me it was good because it's good to hear all of the theories and all of this, sort of refreshes my memory. But the only thing that I really enjoyed to learn about yesterday, was from a side talk that I had with someone who was attending, with Nermin Riyad. Nermin Riyad is the head of the Coptic orphans. And why I was excited, about what she said, because she gave me a very good example of how you can effect change. The USAID, as you know, funds a lot of Coptic orphans. And they have done a very interesting program. And this program is called the Valuable Child. And this Valuable Child program spends money on tutoring the children. On tutoring, so it brings one Muslim girl and one Christian girl and makes one of them tutor the other. And like this, it breaks the barriers between them and friendships develop. And they start to interact in such a way that it would pave the future for a better relationship, and as I said, for disrupting the evil narrative that we have. And I asked her, how successful is it? Because one of our problems was that the Muslims would not allow their children to play with Christians. Are they allowing you to have the child, to take the child and put them in a group like this, in a group of 2, where you're able to sort of guide them into this? And she said, yes, actually they come, and because there's tutoring, it's free tutoring, right? They're offering them a service, and all need free tutoring. They want their children to succeed in school. Because it's free tutoring, yes, they want it. So it is an excellent, excellent idea, and an innovative idea on how to change, and how to change at the grassroots. And to be honest, I think this is where our effort should go now. It should not be addressed to forcing the Egyptian president, who is enabling change, to make more laws and do more things when the people have not yet accepted the idea as good as they should. How many Christian channels do we have? Loads of Christian channels. Are we using them effectively? We have airtime. You can speak to everyone. Use it. right? So there are many tools. It's a different world. Use this world, and you will be successful. And look at, and from my perspective, I think we are in a great period, not in a bad period. I think that the fact that many of us are here and are able to say these things and to sit together and talk about it like this is a great advancement in our situation. Let us capitalize on it. Thank you very much.
Now, Dr. Ashraf Sadiq will talk with us about wonderful Coptic issues that he expert in it.
Again, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm afraid I have to read because, as you know, I used to speak without any paper in French, in Arabic. I was not at all Francophone. I have never learned French. I got it like this. I have written 30, 40 books, and hundreds of articles, but like a miracle, if you believe. So I have to read. The thing is, the English, it was my first foreign language, and I possessed it very well until 30. When I was 30, I began to lose little by little, because I am in France when I was 25 years old, and so I didn't use it anyway. But it is still maybe, sometimes I feel it. So it is a new challenge for the Copts answering the controversy against their culture. In the history of Egypt, the Copts have played a very important part, both on a political and cultural level. We all remember the contributions, even in contemporary history, of famous Coptic personalities such as Makram Abeid, Iris Habib al-Masri, Bahur Labib, Claudius Labib, Isaac Fanous, Wisa Wasif family, and Boutros Ghali, etc. However, we must recognize that the Copts are no longer this social and intellectual elite, which did play an important part in the history of the country. Many of the famous upper-class educated Coptic families have immigrated to Western countries. In Upper Egypt also, the big families who owned large properties and ruled whole villages are now scattered and have lost their political power. A few Coptic wealthy people continue to play a role, mainly through their money. Would they lose it, their power would disappear at once. Christian professors have more or less disappeared from the Egyptian universities, where they were over 30% in the first half of the 20th century. In the past few years, however, we have witnessed a new kind of persecution against the Coptic community. It has developed in the field of culture. It took me some time to realize how important it was. I first noticed it during the international conferences on Egyptology or Coptology. Some people introducing themselves as scholars give lectures on false historical background, aiming at destroying Coptic culture and the Christian faith. One example, I recently heard a professor claiming that the word prayer and fasting didn't exist before Islam and were introduced by the Arabs. Of course, I stopped him, it was in Egypt last year, and told him from even pharaonic period, not only Christian, Coptic, all over the world, but well, it is a pity. It is a pity. However, while in the international conferences it was easy to refute such stupid allegation, I realized that the Egyptian media, television, radio, newspaper, internet, took advantage of ignorance of the people to spread wrong information on this type. An impressive percentage of their program are dedicated to religion, thus widening the gap between the communities. The failure of education over the past 40 years or so prepared an ideal ground for this type of propaganda. After exposing more precisely this situation, we shall endeavor to suggest some answers to the question, how can we fight back these culture attacks? What I said yesterday, this paragraph. Coptic identity is shaped by its culture, a treasure widely inherited from ancient Egypt, which has allowed humanity to develop its best qualities: language, literature, history, liturgy, science, well, etc., arts, biblical knowledge, theology, are being studied all over the world since the middle of the 19th century by scholars who recognize them as most enlightening aspect of human achievements. By developing, preserving them, the Copts may hopefully succeed in being recognized as a civilization worthy of the world's protection. This will help them to overcome attempts of destruction of their identity. I have something to say. I think also the history, the geography, the history, it is the heart of the culture. I always very keen in Egypt, of course, or among Egyptians in Europe, because I'm in France, but I go to give some lectures sometimes in Germany and in England and or where in Europe. They don't know at all the history, at all. Very little bit, and sometimes false knowledge. The controversies destroying Coptic culture and identity seems to be the hope of some people. It is rather easy in Egypt for three main reasons. A, most people have little knowledge concerning the history and the culture of their own country. The school program ignores not only the Coptic period in history, but also most of the meaning of ancient Egyptian culture. Even at the university, teaching are often very poor, and many even introduce false concepts. The students who are really interested have to look by themselves into books and to do their own research. The second, or B, the reason is that the present media are extremely powerful. The television is watched by millions of people who have, as we said before, no cultural background to question what is told to them. Consequently, it is very easy to fool them by telling lies and producing fact proof to convince them. The third reason is, of course, the Copts are emerged in an Islamic atmosphere. Although, thanks to their courage and strong faith, they have resisted over 14 centuries. They cannot help being influenced by the general way of thinking. This makes them vulnerable to a certain points. Second, answers, punctual answers. Of course, it is necessary to counter each attack, whether it concerns a television program, a lecture, an article, a book, etc., the Christian satellite canals, following the example of some courageous Coptic and Christian channels, are extremely useful in this respect. They answer all the questions, explain both Christianism and other culture, denounces fact information, and put forward the truth. Newspaper as Watani also do a beautiful work by giving clear and true information and sound and witty argumented criticism. However, these punctual answers are not enough. The problem needs much more fundamental change. It is still, of course, I know, as Dr. Fatin said, well, it is yet imperfect, because even 3 or more Christian satellite channels in Egypt, but I don't see at all the importance of the history itself as a history. I had been invited in the last years about 3 or 4 times. When I began to speak about the history, well, the journalist wants something else. Are you happy in France? How are the Copts and the diaspora? Well, I would like to say that we have to put some programs about the history to learn the people, not only the young people, young or seniors. Anyway, it is very, very important. As I told you, if we give something about history, it is a culture. Because if we teach or speak about history, we speak about everything. The language, we speak about science, we speak about the arts. Even when I teach Egyptology, speak about the musical instruments, and I speak about medical text. We have a lot. I was specialized certain years in medical text, etc. Fundamental answers. I am personally sad to notice that in France, Coptic children and youth seem to show little interest in Coptic culture. Most of them do attend the Coptic culture and liturgies, which enable them to keep in touch with their faith. friends and community. But none of them is planning to do higher studies either in Coptic history or language, nor in Egyptology. Those who go in the higher studies are all oriented towards engineering or computer. Let us hope the next generation may feel more attracted by their culture roots. The problem is entirely different in Egypt. While the very low level of education makes the people weak to answer the attacks against their culture and identity, I am pleased to notice that a new generation of young researchers is developing. The last conference held in March last year at the Coptic Institute of Higher Studies gave the opportunity to many young scholars to express themselves. Many of these lectures were of very high scientific level. The fact that they could give their lecture in Arabic was a great encouragement to them, as I am used to attend international conferences where scholars from all over the world speak about Coptic culture and history. I enjoyed very much hearing Copts speaking and writing their own history. Indeed, Coptology has many developed Western countries. It owes a lot to French, British, German, Italian, Belgian, Dutch, American scholars, and of course, we must be grateful for all the beautiful work they have done and are still doing. Our culture is a treasure for the whole humanity. I think I have to stop because of the time. I was slowly, but I can't, go very fast. Thank you very much.